The defendant is present along with all the attorneys of record. Sir, I'll remind you, you're still under oath. Ms. Frese, you may continue with your direct examination of this witness.
Sir, what is a search warrant?
A search warrant? It's wow. It's just a document that we produce that we get signed by a judge to go search for evidence.
And so it's a formal application that you submit asking for permission to search a property, is that right?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say, sir, that if...
Is this working? It doesn't sound like it's...
Good, thank you, Karen.
Sorry, I didn't think you could hear me.
There we go. Would it be fair to say that if you were aware of a house that was reported to have sex trafficking in New Sharon, Iowa, that that would have been something you would have looked into?
Yes.
Now, sir, I want to refer you back to this 50-something page document that's in front of you. It's fair to say that it contains multiple different reports attached to it. Is that right?
That is true, yes.
Some of them are a couple pages long, the reports. Is that right?
Yes.
Multiple reports are just leads that are a paragraph or so long. Is that right?
That's correct.
But it'd be fair to say that on each page it lays out some sort of sex trafficking or prostitution. Is that correct?
The stuff I just been looking at the stuff that you have underlined, so I haven't read all of them. But
it'd be fair to say that from the document that's in front of you, that sex trafficking was mentioned multiple times in the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts. Isn't that right?
yes, and it looks like some of these you have are psychics, but yes, it is fair to say it was mentioned a bunch of times.
No further questions.
Ms. Frese, before I turn to the state, I want to clarify in my own mind that I haven't seen the document that's in front of the witness, and I want to be clear. When did the defense receive this documentation from the state?
We received it as part of discovery originally with the case.
All right. All of that was received prior to the trial?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the state?
Yeah. That was one of my questions, Judge, but hang on just a second.
I just wanted to get it clear in my notes. So
Appreciate that. Thank you. During the investigation, Cristhian Rivera, the defendant, was developed as a potential suspect. Is that right?
That's correct.
That lead came from a review of a surveillance video taken from the house of Logan Collins. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that surveillance video showed what appeared to be a jogger running on Boundary to the north that appeared to be female, correct?
That is correct.
And investigators came to the conclusion that that was Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
Yes.
You were aware in the investigation that Mollie Tibbetts frequently went for a run in the evening, particularly in the summer. Is that right?
Yes.
Mollie Tibbetts had been residing with her boyfriend Dalton Jack and his brother and fiance in Brooklyn the summer of 2018. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that information, or the fact that she was living there, well, let me back up. Mollie Tibbetts was also working at a daycare in Grinnell, Iowa during the summer, correct?
That's correct.
She just completed her freshman year at Iowa, correct?
Yes.
All right. That lead that was developed off of that video from Logan Collins' residence was essentially the lead that broke open this case, correct?
That is true, yes.
And led to the actual killer of Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
That's true.
In the video from Logan Collins' residence, a black Chevy Malibu can be seen, correct?
Yes, several times.
There were distinct markings on that black Chevy Malibu, right?
Yes, there were.
Including spoked wheels, chromed handles, and a chromed mirror, correct?
That's correct.
And the chrome mirror was an aftermarket feature of that particular car, is that right?
That's correct.
Cristhian Rivera was tied to that Chevy Malibu through a vehicle stop, well, not a vehicle stop, but an interaction that Steve Kivy had with him in August of 2018, correct?
That is correct.
Cristhian Rivera told you and other officers that he was the exclusive owner of that vehicle, correct?
That is correct.
That vehicle was found later to contain the blood of Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
That is correct.
And later on in the investigation, Cristhian Rivera was interviewed, correct?
Yes.
And I believe you've already indicated this, but he ended up confessing to the death or to the killing of Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
Yes, he did.
And he also led you and other officers directly to her body location. Is that right?
That is correct too.
Had investigators been searching the area looking for Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes, the entire investigation.
And until Cristhian Rivera led you to the body, you did not know, and other law enforcement did not know the location of Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
Yes, he had to actually point out the location in a very large cornfield to us.
Did you ever develop any connection between Cristhian Rivera and Gavin Jones or Dalton Hanson or James Lowe?
No, Cristhian Rivera said he did this all by himself, and I never heard those other names before a couple weeks ago.
Agent Valletta, let's get back to the timeline. On July 18th of 2018, at about 7:45 p.m. is when Mollie is seen jogging on Boundary in Brooklyn, Iowa.
That's true.
Okay, that was on July 18th of 2018, correct?
That's true.
She was not reported missing until the following day, July 19th of 2018, correct?
That is correct.
In fact, the first contact law enforcement ever had with Dalton Jack or the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts would be when the local sheriff's deputy in Poweshiek County went out to the West Des Moines address on the call, correct?
That's true, yes.
All right. When did you or other DCI get involved in the investigation?
I was first there on the 20th, and then other DCI personnel, I think, got there that next Monday, which would be the 23rd.
And is that when the investigation began in earnest?
Yes.
Were there other people that were involved in the investigation and the search for Mollie Tibbetts that were not part of law enforcement?
Several volunteer firefighters, probably most of the Brooklyn community. But yes, there were lots.
During the investigation, did the name Gavin Jones, Dalton Hanson, or James Lowe ever get raised to you?
I don't remember hearing those names until about 2 weeks ago.
Were you ever, or are you aware of any information that law enforcement was able to develop between Gavin Jones, Dalton Hanson, James Lowe, and the black Chevy Malibu that had Mollie's blood in it?
No. Cristhian Rivera said he was the sole driver of that car.
And we've heard from Mr. Maki today, an inmate that had a conversation with Gavin Jones. You were sitting here in the courtroom when that occurred, right?
Yes.
The information that was provided by Mr. Maki indicated that he was told Mollie was wrapped in some sort of covering or plastic before her body was disposed of. Are you aware of that?
I heard that, yes.
At the location where Mollie Tibbetts was located, was there any plastic that was found that would have been on or near her body?
No.
And I believe the testimony was at trial that Mollie Tibbetts' body was found over 400 feet from the roadway in a cornfield. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
In your opinion, how well concealed was the body of Mollie Tibbetts?
In my opinion, I would not have been able to find it unless it was pointed out to me.
Her body was covered in corn stalks.
That's true, yes.
We've seen photos of that area, but really the only identifier that is noticeable when you're at that location is her colorful shoes that she ran in, correct?
That's correct. She was very decomposed, so it wasn't as easy to see as someone that would have just died a day or so earlier.
And investigators learned at the location where Mollie Tibbetts was found that her shorts and underwear had been removed from her body, correct?
That is true.
And her legs were spread apart, is that correct?
That's correct.
We have argued that there was a sexual motive to this crime. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
At least potentially, correct?
That would be my theory, yes.
And the statements that Cristhian Rivera made during his interview would also suggest that he found Mollie Tibbetts attractive. Would that be true?
Yes, he said that.
We also received information in this case from an FBI agent, Kevin Horan. Is that right?
Yes.
And that information would have placed Mollie Tibbetts being abducted just east of Brooklyn on 385th Avenue. Is that right?
Yes.
And that her body or her person would have sped up at one point several miles south of that location.
Yes, I believe it's 60 miles an hour roughly.
And it was in that area that Special Agent Horan told you that you needed to focus your search.
That is correct.
And it was in that area that later the defendant, Cristhian Bahena Rivera, led you to the location of Mollie Tibbetts' body. Is that right?
Yes.
We also had another witness, Christina Stewart. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Christina Stewart observed Mollie Tibbetts running east of Brooklyn. Do you recall that information?
Yes.
And Christina Stewart reported that she was running in a pink jogging bra, black shorts, and a headband. Is that right?
Yes.
What clothing was found on Mollie Tibbetts or near her whenever her body was recovered?
I think it was exactly as Christina Stewart described.
Which would suggest that Mollie Tibbetts was abducted east of Brooklyn, Iowa, correct?
Correct.
Transported to a location,
Yes.
and at some point was stabbed and murdered. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's what the evidence shows in this case, correct?
That is correct.
Any connection at all through your investigation to Gavin Jones, Dustin Hanson, James Lowe, or anyone else other than Cristhian Rivera?
No, Cristhian Rivera murdered Mollie Tibbetts.
That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Frese, anything else to this witness?
Sir, you're aware that there's been DNA testing done in this case, is that right?
Yes.
And specifically, it was requested by Mr. Brown that the trunk liner undergo additional testing, isn't that right?
Yes, that's true.
And you're familiar with that testing result, is that right?
Yes.
Mollie Tibbetts' blood was found in my client's trunk, isn't that right?
That is true.
Along with that, there were 2 other samples that were found, isn't that right?
Yes.
And those 2 samples, they were ran against my client's DNA, isn't that right?
Yes, they would have been.
His
Yes.
DNA was submitted,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes.
And there was no match found with my client's DNA, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, there has been no other samples submitted, isn't that right, sir?
Yes.
You could request Gavin Jones' DNA, is that right?
Yes, I could. You're right.
You also could ask for James Lowe's DNA, is that right?
Yes.
And you could submit those to the DNA lab to be reviewed, isn't that correct?
Yes.
But you haven't requested Gavin Jones's DNA, is that right?
That's correct.
You haven't requested James Lowe's DNA, is that right?
That's correct.
In fact, you haven't requested anyone's DNA other than my client's, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, sir, do you know what it means, a false confession?
Yes, I'm very well aware of the term.
What is a false confession?
Isn't it kind of what it says? Someone that confesses to something that they didn't do?
Now, sir, you're familiar with the name Ron Pexa, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And you're familiar with information from his daughter that he molested her, is that correct?
Yes.
You're also familiar that Mollie Tibbetts' body was found near his home, is that right?
Yes.
What, if any, information or investigation have you done into Ron Pexa?
Judge, I might object. It's not relevant. This has nothing to do with your motion for newly discovered evidence.
Well, Ms. Frese, it seems to me, if I remember correctly, I think Ron Pexter was talked about at trial, and I don't think this would fall under the category of new evidence.
Well, Gavin Jones indicated that they had a Tama County police officer with connections to the sex trafficking.
All right, with that overruled, go ahead and answer if you can.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you repeat it? Thank you.
What, if any, information or investigation have you done into Ron Pexter?
I think as I testified in trial, we went out, looked through his house and saw that he didn't have a torture room. If I remember correctly, that was maybe a week or two before Cristhian Rivera confessed. So I don't know. I don't think we did anything past that with Ron Pexter.
You're aware that Mollie Tibbetts' Fitbit quit sending signals around his residence, isn't that right?
I'm going to object to this line of questioning again on Ron Pexter. They knew about him at trial. They could have followed up on this. They could have asked other questions. They didn't do it. This is not newly discovered evidence.
Well, Ms. Frese, again, I thought the direction you said we were going here is there was going to be some connection to Tama County here and him being law enforcement there.
Gavin Jones identified a Tama County deputy or
Yeah.
Tama County police officer as being involved.
So ask about that.
Was Ron Pexter a Tama County deputy, sir?
I think he's a reserve deputy that works at the courthouse, but I'm not quite sure what his function is.
And
But
that's-
yes, that is true. He's a Tama County deputy.
No further questions.
State, have anything else to this witness?
A couple other things. Who told you that he had exclusive use of the black Malibu where Mollie Tibbetts' blood was found?
Cristhian Rivera did.
Did he ever indicate in any of the interviews that you're aware of with Pamela Romero or any other officer or any other person that anyone ever used his car, stolen his car, or that the black Malibu was ever missing?
No.
That's all.
Anything else to this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You're excused. Why don't you go ahead and leave that document there if you would. Yeah, if you would. Thank you. Defense may call their next witness.
We call Samantha Ricks.
Judge, may we approach, please?
Yes. Good morning, ma'am. Again, before you're seated, I'll swear you in. Can I get you to raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you go ahead and be seated there. And again, ma'am, just make sure you speak up if you would, and maybe get a little closer to the microphone. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Ms.
Ma'am, please state your full name.
Samantha Ricks.
Ma'am, currently you live in Montezuma, Iowa, is that right?
Yes.
At a time previous, did you live in a trailer park in Montezuma, Iowa?
Yes, I actually just moved out at the end of February.
Were you ever acquainted with Xavier Harrelson?
Yes. He's been on camping trips with us. He's been to all of my kids' birthday parties. He's spent nights in my home. He's my 6-year-old son's best friend.
Do you know Sarah Harrelson?
Yeah, Xavier's mom. We've talked, on many different occasions over the last 3-4 years.
So you're acquainted with both of them, is
Yes.
that right?
Yep.
But your ties would be more through your child being friends with Xavier, is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
Now, you are the person that reported Xavier Harrelson missing, is that right?
Yes.
Do you know a man named James Lowe.
Judge, I'm going to object. This has no bearing or relevance to this case. There is no connection between James Lowe and Mollie Tibbetts' disappearance. My concern is that this is an ongoing investigation relating to a missing 10-year-old kid.
Okay. Mr. Brown, I understand your concern. I understand your objection. I am not going to sustain your objection to this question because it has to do with Mr. Lowe. So I will allow her to answer that. But again, I'm sensitive to the issue you've raised. We may get there depending on where we go. So, ma'am, do you remember the question?
If I know James Lowe?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Is he somebody that used to be a boyfriend of Sarah Harrelson?
Yes.
Same objection, Judge.
Same ruling.
Where, before he was put in jail, where did James Lowe reside?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Same ruling. Go ahead and answer if you know, ma'am.
There was a camper out at Fun Valley, the old Fun Valley ski resort here, just southeast or southwest of town. That's where he'd been staying. That's where I had gone the day that Sarah contacted me.
And Sarah Harrelson contacted you that she couldn't find Xavier, is that right?
Yes.
And what did she say to you?
Objection. Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead, ma'am.
She had asked that I'd drive out to see if maybe Xavier happened to be with James Lowe. And I mean, I did. I drove out there. He wasn't there. There was no vehicle or anything. So I left a note with my number stating that Xavier had been missing since, I think it was about 11:30 that morning. And this would have been closer to 4:45, 5 o'clock when I arrived at the camper. She didn't call me until after 4.
Did you know Xavier to spend time with James Lowe?
Judge, I'm going to object. It's not relevant. It's immaterial. Same objection.
Well, Mr. Brown, again, I'm sympathetic to your plight and I tend to agree with it, but I'm going to allow the defense a little more to develop this. But I would just again remind the defense who we're here on. New trial in the Rivera case, right?
Correct.
So develop this, but we need to get back to that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's go then.
Could you reread the question?
Did you know Xavier to spend time with James Lowe?
After him and Sarah separated, I can't recall of an instance of Xavier leaving with him. I know that he's been back to the home. I don't know. I don't want to necessarily say hanging out, but I've never known Xavier to leave with him after they separated.
So you knew James Lowe to come back to the Harrelson home, is that right?
Yeah.
And so even though Sarah and him were no longer together, they would still spend time together.
Yes.
So you go out to the campground and you look for Mr. Lowe, is that right?
Right.
And you can't find him.
And nowhere to be found. The camper's shut down, locked up. So I left a little note in the door hole of the camper door. And the next day with DCI agent Chris Schlager, I took him out there to show him where it was and that I had been there, and the note wasn't there anymore. So somebody had gotten...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, ma'am, but this is becoming non-responsive to any question posed by the defense.
Sustained. Next question.
Ma'am, you left this note with your phone number, is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever receive a call from James Lowe?
No. And I found that odd.
So the next day, you said that you assisted the DCI, is that right?
Yep.
And what were they asking for your assistance on?
Objections far too broad. This is not relevant. This gets into sensitive information potentially with this investigation. It has nothing to do with this case.
Sustained.
Did you go back to the James Lowe residence?
With the DCI agent, yes.
And why did you go back to the James Lowe residence?
To show him...
Same objection, Your Honor.
Look,
Ms. Frese, I want to get to where we need to go with this, and that is what we're here on, and I'm not finding it.
Your Honor, James Lowe is connected with the Xavier Harrelson disappearance.
That
And
part we've established.
James Lowe is also involved in sex trafficking. Gavin Jones, so I can't connect the dots unless I present a case.
Judge, there's no evidence the defense has given the court, either in a pleading or anything, that James Lowe is involved in sex trafficking. The investigation they keep referring to in Mahaska County, he wasn't even charged with anything relating to sex trafficking.
It is preposterous that Mr. Brown says there's no evidence of sex trafficking. Mr. Brown gets up in front of juries in sexual abuse cases all the time.
Hold on, Ms. Frese. Ms. Frese.
That's not what I said.
Again, I'm going to give you a little more leeway here, but we need to get to where we need to go here, and we're spending too much time on Xavier Harrelson than we are on this case, and so I want to get there.
Ma'am, did you go out to James Lowe's camper with the DCI?
Yes.
Why did you go out there?
Because he didn't know where it was, so I took him out there and showed him exactly which camper. That's it.
When you got out there, was the note there?
No,
Was James Lowe there?
no,
Now, you knew James Lowe to have a criminal history, is that right?
yes,
In fact, I think he used your car at one point to commit a crime, is
Yep.
that right?
yep,
You also know James Lowe to be a drug dealer, is that right?
yes.
What sorts of drugs does he deal?
I know of meth.
How do you know that he is a methamphetamine dealer?
I'm a recovering addict myself.
So has he dealt to you before?
Yes,
Do you believe James Lowe has connections to the drug cartels?
Objection. This calls for speculation. And what's the relevance of this? I mean,
Well, before I rule, what is the relevance?
That this is a sex trafficking ring, and that often drug trafficking is part of sex trafficking. The woman that reported that she was sex trafficked was sex trafficked because of her addiction.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I have my doubts about the relevancy, but given the understanding of Mr. Brown that you'll be able to cross-examine, we'll address it that way. So objections overruled. You may answer the question, ma'am.
okay, what was the question again?
Do you believe that James Lowe has cartel connections?
He's, up until the last 3 to 6 months that I've known him, he's been down and out compared to what he has been the last few years that I've known him. I mean, he's always been supplied, and I mean, I'm sure he probably knows big players. I don't know personally of any of that information, but he's got some big people somewhere.
James Lowe, the crime involving your vehicle, which you didn't have anything to do
No,
with,
I was at home.
but it involved him stealing, is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
James Lowe was having money problems, is that correct?
Yeah, I actually just gave him a minivan. It was shortly after Christmas. He was so down and out, I was getting ready to send it to the junkyard, and I gave him the van just for him to sleep in, and I mean, it barely drove, but it moved.
What does it mean to be fronted drugs?
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance.
Sustained.
No further questions.
Mr. Brown, any cross-examination?
I don't have any questions for this witness. Thank you very much.
Okay, ma'am, thank you for being here. You're excused. Before we go any further, let's take up the matter. Mr. Brown, did you have a chance to review those affidavits?
I apologize, Judge. I did not. I had something else going on at break.
Well, we just need to make sure that that issue's still
I'm
out
sorry.
there.
I should have done it at break, and I didn't. It
All right.
won't take me long.
Okay. Defense may call their next witness.
Call Ben Johnston, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Johnston. Mr. Johnston, I'll swear you in.
Yes, sir.
You swear or affirm the testimony about here will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Okay, going be seated, please. Go ahead, Mr. Frese.
Thank you. State your name, please.
Ben Johnston
How are you employed, sir?
with Mahaska County Sheriff's Office.
In what capacity?
I'm a narcotics detective.
How long have you been so employed?
With the Sheriff's Office, going on 4 years,
How long have you been assigned with narcotics?
3 years.
What training, education, and experience do you have particular to narcotics?
Upon graduating college for criminal justice, I was hired by police department in Oskaloosa in 2010. I then got hired, like I said, approximately 4 years ago with the Sheriff's Office. During my time as a police officer with Oskaloosa, along with my time during serving for Mahaska County Sheriff's Office, I've went to multiple schoolings, trainings in regards to narcotics and narcotic distribution. Those trainings consist of various things pertaining to narcotics, identifying drugs, how drugs are distributed, how drugs are manufactured or grown, the safe way to dispose of or to take down certain marijuana grows, methamphetamine labs, things of that sort.
In your training and experience with narcotics, do you also have training and experience in the area of human trafficking?
Not specifically human trafficking, no.
Do you find in your training and experience that those two tend to run together once in a while?
I have not had a exact experience of that myself.
But are you trained in that?
I have been informed that that happens.
What information have you been informed of in that regard?
Very vague information. It is discussed in narcotics trainings that at times these things can go hand in hand.
In your training, restrict that, in your experience, have you come to know an individual named James Lowe?
Yes.
Is he known generally in the Mahaska, Poweshiek County area to be involved in drug trafficking?
Yes.
Has intelligence been given to you that James Lowe, in the calendar year 2018 and beyond, possibly involved in the trafficking of women for sex?
I had received one alleged complaint of that.
And that was in 2019?
Yes.
And who gave that complaint to you?
A female, Brianna.
Judge, I'm gonna object. First of all, this is not a charge. This is information that's already been redacted from the record that the defense filed, so I'm not sure it's necessary to use the young woman's name.
Sustain the objection. You've established that there's one example of this happening.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into specifics any more than that.
So it was a young woman you spoke to,
Correct.
and she was from the Mahaska County area?
At the time I spoke with her, yes.
This young woman, how did she come to your attention?
She had an interaction with law enforcement the evening before, or the night before, and
Go ahead.
it was the next day she had came to the Mahaska County Law Center to speak further about some reports that she made to them. I was then contacted.
This female, how old was she?
I believe in her 20s.
And she was interacting with a state trooper, I believe, the night before, correct?
That is correct.
And that state trooper, do you call his name?
Yes.
Who's that?
Brad Cubitt.
And Trooper Cubitt, he's someone who is trained and experienced and has experience in law enforcement?
Yes.
Someone whose opinion you trust?
Yes.
He picked this female up, it was the evening of, I think, March 19, 2019, or March 20, somewhere in there.
Correct.
And she was walking along Highway 92 outside of Oskaloosa, is that correct?
That's correct.
What time of day?
I just know it was late in the evening, I believe.
And what were the circumstances behind Trooper Cubitt picking her up?
If I recall correctly, I believe it was a citizen that had passed by and observed this young lady walking along the highway, appeared to be distressed, and called law enforcement to check on her.
And Trooper Cubitt obviously did that, correct?
That's correct.
Did this young female then, well, first of all, was she in distress, to your knowledge?
I don't recall exactly what was going on that evening. I was not present.
But Trooper Cubitt was able to get some interesting information from this young female that caused her to come to see you the next day.
That's correct.
Is that something in your training and experience that often happens, that a state trooper picks somebody up along the road and then has you come to the sheriff's office the next day to give a statement?
Yes.
Happens all the time?
Yes.
How many times in your career has it happened?
A lot. I couldn't give an accurate number on it.
So when she came the next day, she'd obviously made some allegations that were, I guess, narcotics related. Is that how you got involved? Correct. Did she make any other allegations generally that you were anticipating hearing the morning of May 20th?
He had informed me prior to any interaction or anything that I have overheard with her that she had made some statements about possibly being assaulted sexually.
Okay. And she talked about being trafficked?
She did use that term, yes.
Okay. And the trooper involved here, when he brings her or has her come to you the next day, is it fair for me to assume that you thought that the trooper thought, terrible question, it was a credible report at that point?
Yeah, I believe he believed what she was stating, yeah.
Yeah, it was cause for concern at least.
Correct.
So when this female came to the Oskaloosa Mahaska County Sheriff's Office, is that where she went?
Yes.
What time of day was it?
I believe mid-morning sometime.
Did she come alone?
I believe she did.
And you interviewed her?
I did not.
Okay, who interviewed her?
Agent DeCamp from DCI, I believe.
Were you present for the interview?
I, off and on, I was not present within the room. In the way our recording rooms are set up, there's a viewing room that you can monitor the screens from inside the recording area.
But you observed at least part of it?
Bits and pieces of it, yes.
Adam DeCamp of the DCI then reported to you what he was hearing?
Yes.
Now, when this female came to the Mahaska County Sheriff's Office that day, did you get a chance to greet her and show her around?
I don't believe I did.
Did you get a chance to observe her demeanor?
Again, through the viewing area of the interview room.
How did she appear to you?
She appeared calm, spoke freely with law enforcement.
Did she appear to be under the influence of any narcotics?
At that time, no.
Did she appear to be under the influence of any alcohol?
I don't believe so.
Did she appear to be sleep deprived?
I don't believe so.
So she was calm and cooperative?
Yes.
So after she gave her statement to Agent DeCamp, did you then visit with Agent DeCamp?
Yes.
And based upon your conversations with Agent DeCamp, you learned that this individual gave information concerning being sexually assaulted, drugged, and sexually trafficked out of a home in New Sharon, Iowa, right?
Yes, those are the statements she gave.
And at that point in time, you thought those statements to be credible, I assume.
At that point, I believe that we had a duty to fulfill to verify whether her statements are credible or not.
Okay. So that doesn't answer my question. You thought they were credible statements?
Yeah,
And that address was 405 East Market Street in New Sharon, right?
yes,
And that's an address known to your task force as being involved in narcotics activity?
that's correct.
Who owned that address?
Male identified as Adam Moshman.
Known to you to be involved in narcotics trafficking at that time?
Yes,
And James Lowe known to frequent that residence?
yes,
James Lowe known to sell drugs out of that residence?
I don't know that for a fact. I have heard statements of that.
James Lowe appeared to be about 50 years old at that time?
Correct.
Okay. So in your training and experience and your job duties, part of what you do is author search warrants, right?
That is correct.
And sometimes search warrants are based upon third-party information, like in this case, correct?
Correct.
In this case, you use an informant, the young lady, right?
Correct.
Now, she wasn't unnamed, she was named, so that lends some credibility to her statement, correct?
That's correct.
But the judge has to make some findings about an informant's credibility before the judge will give you permission to search someone's home. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And part of what you do as an officer who authors search warrants is that you essentially vouch for this person's credibility, right?
That's correct.
And that's in what we typically see in a search warrant application as informants attachment B. And you use that in this case, right?
That's correct.
You told the judge that the information supplied by the informant has been corroborated by law enforcement personnel. You recall checking that box?
Yes.
What information do you refer to there that was corroborated by law enforcement personnel?
Judge, I'm going to object as to relevance. There's still no connection here between this investigation and Mollie Tibbetts.
Overruled. Go ahead.
The young female had given descriptions of the residence along with specifics when it comes to the nature of surveillance cameras with surrounding the residence. During that part, I had went to the residence and observed these things to be true. That corroborated those statements that she made to be true to law enforcement.
So you don't make a practice of presenting information to a judge to search someone's home that is, in your opinion, not credible, right?
Right.
Permission to approach?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Priest.
Deputy, I put in front of you what I've marked for identification as Defendant's Exhibit A. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
If you take a moment and thumb through that, let me know when you're finished.
Okay.
What is that document?
That would appear to be my application, search warrant application.
Does that document fairly and accurately depict, but for the redacted portions, your search warrant application presented to the judge on or about, I don't see its data, but in March of 2019?
I believe so.
I'd offer Defendant's Exhibit A, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection that it's the affidavit. Would object to relevance or any connection to this case. And I'm not sure that they don't already have a defendant's exhibit A somewhere. I'm not sure the marking is accurate.
Mr. Frese, do you know anything about whether you have an A?
I think this is the only A.
Assuming this is the only A, this A is admitted.
Agent, I want you to go to page, what says page 5 of 13 on your affidavit. Now, this search warrant was authored and granted in March of 2019, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, were you involved at all in the search for Mollie Tibbetts?
No, I was not.
Your task force is the mine task force?
That's correct.
What areas does that cover?
We cover Mahaska County, Marion County, Polk County, parts of Poweshiek County, specifically Grinnell area. It's a multi-jurisdictional task force, so we have officers from surrounding agencies all assigned to the area.
Anyone from Poweshiek County on your task force?
No, there's not.
You routinely share intelligence with Grinnell Police Department and Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Is that something, if you get information from someone in rural Poweshiek County dealing drugs or buying drugs, whatever, you share that among agencies?
If we believe that it would have a direct, line to them, yes, we would share that.
Okay. In your search warrant on page 5, your application affidavit, at the last paragraph on the bottom of the page, this female stated that in May of 2018, she was at a Casey's in Brooklyn, Iowa. Is that your recollection?
What page are you looking at?
Page
You told me-
5. Page 5.
Okay, page 5 of mine must not be the same page 5 as you.
So page 8 at the bottom of the right, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was looking at the top.
Okay. Can you say that again?
This female who made the report stated that in May of 2018, she was dating someone and she met up at the Casey's in Brooklyn with a man named James Lowe.
That's correct.
Okay, so this all started in May of 2018, correct?
Correct.
And James Lowe put $10 worth of gas in this female's car to get her to go to New Sharon, right?
That is what she said, yes.
And that she followed him to New Sharon with the promise of more gas, right?
Correct.
And that she did that and then wound up in James Lowe's home somehow, or that 405 East Market Street address.
Correct.
Again, James Lowe's about 50 years old.
Correct.
What did the female relay about going into this home at 405 East Market in May of 2018? What happened to her?
After getting gas at both places, she was with her boyfriend at the time, and they had traveled back to the address on East Market, and they had accompanied Mr. Lowe into the house, where they then sat around, conversed, listened to music, and smoked marijuana.
At some point, was she drugged by Mr. Lowe?
At that point, she said that she was shot up, which would be somebody injecting you with drugs.
And was that person Mr. Lowe?
She advised, yes, it was.
And then what happened to her after that?
She said after that, she doesn't really recall anything that had occurred.
In your training and experience, if someone is shot up with something and they lose time or fail to recall, what's your experience and training tell you as to what kind of drug that would likely be?
Checks, calls for speculation. Has nothing to do with the Mollie Tibbetts case.
I'm
Still
going to
no connection.
sustain. I mean, the record says, you shot up. I'm not sure it matters what drug it was.
Do you have information concerning narcotics being sold out of 405 East Market, correct?
Yes.
Those narcotics include things like opioids.
That's not the information that I received.
Okay. Is there any information at all that anyone has shared with you concerning that?
Same objection, Judge. This is irrelevant.
Sustained.
She also told you that she was continued to be shot up for a long period of time at 405 East Market, right?
That's correct.
How long a period of time was she said she was shot up at 405 East Market?
Objection to relevance.
Overruled. The witness may answer if he knows.
I believe it was randomly through the period of time of May to August.
And during May through August, she was shot up, and where was she kept inside that house?
Into an upstairs bedroom.
And was she allowed to leave that house?
She advised no, that she didn't feel she was.
Did she tell you who was in control of her in that house during the May through August?
She advised that it was James Lowe.
And did she tell you what was happening to her in that house from May through August?
She felt that she was being assaulted.
Was she able to recall it very well?
No, she was not.
Then how was she able to come to the opinion that she was assaulted in that house?
Her description was that she was sore in her private area.
Did she ever ascribe any statements to James Lowe that furthered her opinion about being assaulted?
Not that I can recall.
She never told you, or you heard, or put in your affidavit that James Lowe would say to people, was it worth it? Was it good?
She did make a statement that she had overheard a conversation of him asking an individual those things, yes.
After someone had been in the room with her?
I don't know that they had been in the room with her, and I don't believe she made that statement either.
Lowe would ask other males that she would hear him say, did you have a good time?
From my recollection, that was only the one time she made that statement, was referencing one incident.
And she told you that she would be injected or shot up every morning.
I don't know if she spoke every morning, but she did speak often.
Okay. If your affidavit says she was injected every morning, that would be the more accurate testimony?
Yes.
And she would wake up feeling foggy, dazed, and sexually violated.
That's correct.
And that was every morning.
I believe so.
What's a trap house?
Trap house can have a different definition to different people. To me specifically, trap house is, we'll call it a residence where various crimes are committed, various people are allowed to stay, drugs are distributed from those areas, people come and go frequently. Yeah.
405 East Market meets that criteria, wouldn't you agree?
I would, yeah, I would say so.
You also learned about a second individual who indicated that James Lowe was possibly intending to traffic or abduct another female, right?
Yes, I did.
And that was in March of 2019, correct?
I believe so.
Tell us about that.
So I had received just a brief statement from an officer of the Oskaloosa Police Department that had advised they received the information of they felt they were being followed.
Okay, and this is a young female?
Yes.
And this young female identified James Lowe as the person who was following her?
They believe that was the male, yes.
And that's included in your application as well?
Correct.
after the search warrant was executed and you had this information about the abduction occurring in 2018 from Brooklyn, did it strike you that it was information you might want to share with the state or the county attorney or the Poweshiek County Sheriff concerning the Mollie Tibbetts case?
I don't believe her to be abducted from Brooklyn. She, up until the point of where she advised that she was injected, her statements appeared to be she was acting as a willing participant during the time of her getting money or fuel at the gas stations from Mr. Lowe. It was her choice, and her as well as her boyfriend's, to follow him to another gas station and then again to go back to the house with him, where they engaged in conversation and drug use.
Okay, well, let me rephrase it then. With the information that you got that this all started in Brooklyn with James Lowe in Brooklyn, and I guess inviting them or inviting her to New Sharon, did you think to possibly share that information with the Poweshiek County Sheriff or the state of Iowa concerning the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts?
No, I did not.
Did anyone share it with the state to your knowledge?
Not that I know. I don't know.
That's all I have.
State, have any questions?
The investigation that you conducted, that you just described with Mr. Frese, James Lowe was the focus of that, correct?
That's correct.
What was James Lowe charged with as a result of your investigation?
I don't believe any charges were filed.
Did you charge him with sex trafficking or any type of sexual abuse charge?
No.
Was that because the investigation determined that there was not enough credible evidence to charge him with that crime?
Correct.
At the end of the investigation, the young woman that you were dealing with, did she admit that she may have made statements that or provided information that she was having trouble remembering?
Yes.
There was another individual that you mentioned with Mr. Frese. Who was that? Another person who was a suspect.
Adam Moshman.
Adam Moshman was actually charged with some weapons violations. Is that right?
That is correct.
Nothing related to sexual abuse or sex trafficking, correct?
Correct.
Gavin Jones, a name familiar to you?
I'm aware of who it is, yes.
Was not connected to this investigation anyway, was he?
No.
And Dalton Hansen, did that name ever come up during your investigation into James Lowe or to involving this particular victim?
No, it did not.
And any mention of Mollie Tibbetts or any connection to Mollie Tibbetts at all?
No, there was not.
All right, and this particular investigation that you just described with Mr. Frese occurred or began almost 7 months after Mollie Tibbetts was recovered in Poweshiek County. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
I don't mean to make you do math on the
Yeah.
stand, I apologize, but
That's all right.
she was recovered in August of 2018, and your investigation began in Mahaska County March of the following year. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
All right, that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions of this witness from the defense?
Briefly, Gavin Jones, known to you as someone to be involved with narcotics?
Yes.
Known to you to be someone who is violent?
Not that I'm personally aware of.
No one's ever reported to you that he has a propensity toward violence?
If the object's been asked and answered, he doesn't know.
Sustained.
Do you have knowledge that he has no contact orders against him?
I do not know that, no.
Do you know him to carry weapons?
No, I do not.
That's all I have.
State, have anything else?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Sir, you're excused. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Let me step down. Counsel, could I have you approach, please? Mr. Brown, at this time, are you prepared to make record on the affidavits?
I can, Judge.
Would you please?
Yeah, we have no objection to the affidavit of Lindsey Voss or to the affidavit of Scott Gracious, which have been supplied to us through EMS. The affidavit of Corey, I'm not sure you pronounce his last name, B-E-B-E, and Shay Moore, we'd object on the basis of relevance. Corey has to do with a child abuse investigation relating, I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything, actually. And it also includes a notice of child abuse assessment, which I don't think should be made public, and photos of a child, an infant who apparently was the subject of this child abuse assessment. So we would object to that. If the court does admit it, we would ask that you seal that particular document in its entirety. And then Shay Moore has to do with Xavier Harrelson. Again, I don't believe there's any relevance here to that, and we would object to Shay Moore's affidavit on the basis of relevance.
Okay, so based on agreement, I will consider the affidavits of Voss and Gracious, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I want to hear from the defense about the concerns about the assessment and pictures being being made part of Beal's affidavit.
It was submitted under seal.
There's already an order there?
Yes, we asked for the order either Thursday or Friday of last week.
Okay, with that then, Beal will be, consider that also. And then Shay Moore, tell me you've heard Mr. Brown's concern. What's the defense's position regarding Shay Moore's affidavit?
It's been submitted. I don't think that I submitted it under seal. I would have no objection to the court submitting it under seal.
Okay, what I'm going to do is, again, I will consider the Shay Moore affidavit, but ask Ms. Frese that you prepare, and actually the sooner the better, get me an order saying that that is also sealed.
All right.
What we will do then is we'll be in recess now until, we'll say we'll be back ready to go at 1:15. Thank you.